What is up, guys? You got Not the Worst here, bringing another Black Desert online video, and today I wanted to kind of go through, if you haven't seen these already, there was a Q&A 2019 for the developers. Apparently we had put together some questions a little while ago that we then sent from EUNA to the developers, and then there was also one from the Taiwanese servers, or players rather, over to the developers as well, that they did include in this. So I'm not going to read through every single one of them. If you want to read through everything yourself, there's a link to this page in the description down below, so you can jump on over and skim through it if you're interested. I did read the whole thing top to bottom a couple of times just to kind of get an idea of what talking points I wanted. And then the other thing I wanted to mention too, I understand this is like part one. I guess stay tuned for the rest of the EUNA answers incoming or whatever. So we have 6 questions, and then the Taiwan has like 30 something, which is kind of interesting. And then as I go through these two, the way they were worded was like a marketing team put together the NAEU ones, and then the Thai ones are straight up like questions that they decided to ask the developers directly from players, which is probably how it should have been worded, but I'll get into that in the first place. So first paragraph that NAEU wrote here was they were talking about party style grinding like Miramach ruins and that sort of thing. Will developers consider adding more monster zones or change some of the existing ones that feature a party based grinding experience? And they kind of dawdle around it. And then though you can certainly enjoy Black Desert alone, there are always ways to enjoy the game with other players, such as playing Savage Rift. LOL. Are you Savage Rift? I don't even think you could play Savage Rift right now, which is weird that they mention it, because if you tried to log in there, you wouldn't get enough people to actually do it. Anyways, Altar of Blood, and then field bosses and guild bosses. We continue to think of ways in which players can enjoy the game together. As you mentioned in your question, Miramach and Gaifen Rossia are great examples. We're aware of requests and are always thinking about ways to make the party play in Black Desert unique. We have also somewhat solidified a direction for the game. Just like how we tried new things in other areas, we're also actively trying new things for the party play. We hope that you look forward to what we have in store for the game. That, just so you know ahead of time, a lot of their answers to things are sort of like that. So you'll notice a trend where, like, if they actually have been working on something directly, they kind of say it, or pretty much tell you, like, we are currently internally developing something like this. And when they don't, and they're just like, yeah, we've heard this suggestion before, but we're not actually doing that, they don't come out right out and say that. They'll say almost this verbatim every single time. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Obviously, you need to not give away what's going on internally when you have questions like this, but I'm just letting you know there's never an instance in any single question where they're like, no, we don't do that. The only time is they sometimes say, like, we're always open to suggestions about classes or whatever, so send us some info and we'll definitely consider it, things like that. They never actually say no to anything, which in some ways I can appreciate their stance on that, but in others I kind of would like for them, if you have solidified a direction for the game, then just kind of say it. Now we've got a question about succession being skill changes for succession being the final stages of class balancing, or will you continue to commit to analyzing and making changes to current classes even after succession? So first they kind of break down succession for you. You get to level 56, and then you would change the way you fight through awakening. Once you're awakened, your character can perform powerful skills using awakening, and this caused some players to only use awakening skills. A good example is Ranger. Ranger uses skills using the longbow and then uses melee with the sword, Sylvian sword, once it's awakened. There's a lot of think about succession. Instead, they didn't want to make it more powerful than awakening, because then it would just make it like a second awakening. Basically, they're just saying the idea with succession was to just give you a different option. They want the two to coexist, which I think we've come to see overall. They're not designed to be one drastically more powerful than the other. And then balancing it, they do note, balancing is a separate issue. Of course, as we introduce succession, more players will utilize main weapon skills, and this might affect the balance of the game. However, we're aware that it's difficult to balance out the game through only succession. We'll continue to balance both main weapon and awakening weapon skills together. We hope that the introduction of succession provides you with more options on how you want to play the game instead of solely playing with awakening weapons. That's been my stance on succession that's come out. There's that. Now, the balancing thing, that might have, for some of you listeners, might have promoted a bit of an omega lol response there, because they obviously have attempted to start balancing and then kind of quit halfway through. However, later on when we get to the Thai questions that are actually very good, they do delve into that a little bit more, that there is class balancing on the horizon. So initially when I read this was kind of like meh, and then later on I was like, oh, okay. Then the Red Battlefield, they mentioned that they are in the works for expanding Red Battlefield, or changing the rules, or having something different along the lines of Red Battlefield for PvP. So that's kind of cool to see. Then they talk about Node Wars quite a bit. There's nothing definitive here. They do mention that territory wars have been put on hold because they recognize that there are issues with node war and siege wars strategic wise, and they want to continue introducing new strategic elements to it, like a shorter process time for elephant nurseries. They just introduced ogres and trolls for conquest wars, I believe on the test server. It might have hit KR servers, I don't recall exactly. Things like that. Question 5 kind of follows up into that same one, and then the last question we got on NAEU was about Medea just being less desirable is actually the term they use than Valencia by a long shot. They kind of just say like, yeah, obviously you're not going to stay in Medea because it's, lower level area than Valencia, but we do have a plan to, make it a little bit more worth your while or more meaningful. That's what they end up saying there. Okay, so there's the NAEU paragraph questions that were asked. Now we got the tie questions. Again, I'm not going to read every single one of these, go through some, and you'll notice a lot are repetitive as well. Wizard neck issue, and who cares? I have a lot of friends playing online, and they say that, a lot of times because there's special objectives and things that don't exist for this game like they do in others, it's not keeping new users from continuing to play the game. My friends don't stay stuck with the game, long term wise. The only thing they really say definitively is that they've been preparing a separate chat server for Rookie Adventures that can gather and talk together to each other, which is soon going to be updated. Outside of that, they just say that they closely monitor why people leave the game. New players specifically leave the game, why they aren't getting grafted in. So they do look at these things, but this is one of the answers where they didn't have a direct answer other than there's a chat. They say more mini games would be cool, and they're just kind of like, yeah, that would be cool. We'll consider and pay closer attention in the future. You can't play a global lab and live servers at the same time. This is true, and they said that they'll find a way. We'll look into a way that allow both servers. I had read, but I haven't tried it myself, that there is a way you have to modify something in the actual launch of the shortcut, I believe, to get it to work. But I'm not too sure. It's not end of the world for me, but because I just do it for testing a little bit. But it would be a little bit of quality of life if we could do both. But it's kind of whatever. They talk about event rewards, whatever. This question is kind of whatever, but I just like the this actual question, knowing, unlike the NAU from a marketing team that put them together, they straight up just asked exactly what the Thai players asked directly, like the way they said it. Valkyrie users are all crying. Are there any plans to balance Valkyrie? I love that question. Not just Valkyrie, but all classes should be fun to play. We'll continue to improve class balance in the future. It's funny that they even included that, honestly. Do you not view crowd control effects as being problematic? They say that we can notice that it can be problematic, but to keep in mind that different classes excel at different things. So there's also to consider solo, small scale, large scale, conquest war, etc. So it's difficult for them to kind of consider nerfing or buffing a specific thing, because doing it in one aspect can negatively impact a different aspect that wasn't initially intended. So when they do changes like this, they like to be quite thorough with it, which I guess is kind of a defense to why they let some of the more egregious things exist longer than they need to. And then we get to one of my favorite things, which I was talking about in Discord. Dark Knight has a lot of balance problems. Why aren't they being fixed? The accuracy bug needs to be fixed. There's a lot of feedback about Dark Knight from everyone. With that in mind, we are preparing an improvement patch for Dark Knight, and it should be released together with Succession. Additionally, we'll be making both small and large balance adjustments for other classes, not just Dark Knight, to go with Succession. That's pretty hopeful. So with that being said, KR hasn't gotten Dark Knight Succession. It's still just on the Global Lab. They should be getting another week or two, depending on what their holiday updates are going to be like, if they're kind of not updating as at the same pace they have been. So that's going to be really, really interesting to see. We did see an accuracy buff go to Dark Knight just recently as well. So it's finally coming around a year and a half later from when it was becoming an issue. But, it's existing. So we'll hang tight and we'll see. Definitely keeps me hopeful. Plans to add ray tracing. After life skill mastery, this is something I talked about in a different video before. After life skill mastery, people can make more silver than defeating monsters. They note that they want to make grinding be more profitable than it should be, because the amount of active playing is obviously should be more rewarding. Something they talk about is raising the price for black magic crystals, so that grinding, getting them, although they are much far and fewer, they're worth like 4 or 5 times in a lot of cases now what they used to be, so you make more money from them now. And then they do talk about how they're updating the trash loot, which should be live on the KR servers pretty soon. We did see that already hit the Global Lab. Keep in mind, when these questions were submitted, some of the updates we've seen in the last couple of weeks obviously are tying in with that, but the questions were obviously answered before those were pushed forward. But they do mention that they keep an eye on that sort of thing as well. They talk about leveling increasing beyond 62. Just mentioning that they don't want to make leveling beyond that too much of a benefit, because then it just becomes one more aspect of the game you have to focus on. Upgrades, yada yada yada. Currently barrier to entry, covered that already about new players quitting. Here's where they mention, I think I talked on this earlier, but this is when they actually say it, why they haven't gotten into territory war. And this is where they say we have things we want to update with Node and Conquest War before we get into territory war, so those have to be addressed. This is actually where they break that one down, and I answered that, I gave that answer earlier. They talk about can't get cooking ingredients after the Imperial update. They said we saw that in KR, but it fixes itself later as that comes out. Why did you nerf Black Magic Crystal? They already answered that in a previous one. Where how many users have left after you adjusted class balance? They are, and they watch that sort of thing. Again, like I said, this is where some of these get a little bit repetitive. More NotTheWorst stuff. What regions do you plan to update over the next 2 years? They don't give a definitive answer there. Obviously, they wouldn't. Do you have any plans to expand the Great Expedition? Absolutely. The Great Expedition will be expanded in the future, including the addition of new ships as well. Flat out. Do you have any plans for larger houses? They say we're looking at it. Are there plans to improve the furniture system? This one's a flat no. One of the very few flat no's they give. There aren't many martial arts classes in game, and classes are more closer to Western fantasy. So how about an Oriental martial arts class? This was a weird question because it isn't like Striker and Mystic like right up that alley. But anyways, the class ideas are always welcome. We'll consider it with an open mind. They say that a lot when people talk about classes. What's the next big update content after the second Great Expedition? Right now, a new class, which we've seen sort of leaked, or not really leaked. They literally gave us pictures and stuff. And Odelita, I'm sure I pronounced that incorrectly, are the main focus. So new area, new class, eventually. Odelita, which has been delayed for over an hour, will be open this winter. And of course, we're working hard to develop Odelita. The Kamasilvi quests were recently renewed in Korea as a prequel of this new storyline. So soon, TM. Which trial characters could use alchemy stones? They will. I'm curious if you have any intention to adjust the amount of Kaffir stones. Pretty much no. They said that they'll revisit this later on in the future and possibly adjust it as power creep continues to be a thing. But it's at the time supposed to be ridiculously insane, because getting a pen is like super lucky, and ridiculously insane is their breakdown of that. Then they just talk about new zone spacing. How does Probus return turnover? No, we talked about that already. Do you have to keep changing things? Reworks are too fast. The answer was yes. Whatever these are hard to obtain, their prices are not much higher than ordinary. Oh, the fishing. Could the catch rate, and they say they're not adjusting catch rates. They do say they want to update the Merchant Prince's ring. They're not sure exactly how it's going to be changed, but they're testing things. That's going to update soon. Once again, that is mentioned. Red Battlefield we covered already. PvP isn't fun because of high damage. They say actually we find people like the high damage type PvP. I don't know what that is, because I don't know what a Gumiho like female character is. But they say there's no plans for that type of character, but we do have another character coming. There was one more big one that I wanted to point out, because these are where it gets super, super repetitive. Do you plan to expand Port Rat? We're continuing Great Expedition. Let me just cut ahead after I grab the one I want to find here. Okay, they talk about airships that were mentioned in a meeting last year. Do you have plans to continue to update or begin update flying mounts? They say that not necessarily flying mounts. If they did introduce that, they would revamp the entire way Black Desert is done. If they do decide that they want to go ahead with it, it is something on the drawing board. If they did it, it wouldn't just be something that flies in the sky, but they'd have a whole release of content. This is kind of a maybe, but really out there, because we'll have to see longevity of that. And then we have, do you have plans to introduce Shy's absolute skills and enhanced skills, is what I was looking for. Shy was created as a unique class, so we have no plans to develop absolute or enhanced skills for Shy. We want Shy to be one of the many ways you can enjoy the game, so your gameplay can be more diverse. On the other hand, we're developing new content which will show Shy's versatility. This does, in here at some point they mentioned this again, and this ties into, if you recall, about a month ago, they were talking about an update specifically towards Shy's social type content we released. So no obvious like, hey, this is exactly what we're talking about, but more alluding to something about Shy and social content updating was mentioned in there. Then they do talk about why Sea Monster mobs were nerfed. They say that they're going to add more later on. Altar of Blood is brought up again. They say, we kind of look at maybe dungeon stuff like that, nothing specific. Do you ever plan to have just straight PvE servers that don't allow PvP? That was a flat no. They're looking at some other things to be rewarding for this, or we'll review it or whatever, but no, they don't plan to do any servers without PvP at all. And then there was one more big one. I want bartering to be more clear. Oh yeah, then the last one I would say, please release more tier 9 horses. They say that they have been looking into development for other horses, but nothing that has fit what BDO is. So right now they're not considering anything to go forward, but that is something they want to if they essentially send us your ideas, which is kind of a whatever, but yeah, that's nothing in the works overall. Then this is the last one that I found pretty interesting. Please remove Cronstone from Dark Rift rewards. They say we are planning to run Dark Rift seasonally. We're currently considering how each season will have new monsters, new patterns, and different rewards. That's pretty cool, I think, and it would also change up a little bit the flood of items that came with Dark Rift. We got Dark Rift on NAEU right around the same time as Central Marketplace, like within a week of each other. Those two things came out, so it was hard to see how the two impacted the market individually. But doing things seasonally would definitely spice things up a little bit for that, especially if Cronstones were, you know, only a certain time. Of course, if they're not the bottom end out of a loot box, it would just be something else, of course, would be down there if it's not Cronstones 1, and you'd have to have a lower end, or you just have, like, when the boxes first came out, the worst thing you could get out of the best box was a Crescent Ring, which is kind of nuts when you think about it. But anyways, that is it for it. Again, link to this if you want to go through each one is in the description below, so you can check that out. If you did enjoy the video, be sure to like it. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you get notifications that when new videos do go out. And if you want to catch me playing live, you can head on over to the Twitch page, which is also in the description below. Drop a follow over there so you get notifications through Twitch there when we are live. What do you guys think about this stuff? Other stuff you wish was in here? Hopefully there's another NAEU part. I got to be honest, though, the way they just took the questions straight from the Thai part versus our marketing team that put these together, ours is kind of a joke, and I don't like how this was done. Why didn't you just ask the questions directly the way we put them? But, you know, whatever, it got out there. We got some kind of insight, I guess. A bit of circumventing, which is to be expected from a company in general. But what do you guys think about it? Anything else you want to hear them address that they didn't already, or anything like that? Let me know in the comments below. With that said, that's going to be it for this one. I want to thank everybody for watching, and I will see you next time.